Are you ready? Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. I lost my uncle. He was 98 years old, my father's last living brother. So I apologize, but let's get started. We're all excited about everything that's going to take place today. And thank y'all for joining us. I'm Jacqueline Bridgeforth Williams. I am the founder and director of the Village Initiative, a grassroots organization focused on educational equity in Williamsburg, James City County Schools. And we are honored to be here today to talk to you about our research on Nicholson Street. Located in the northeast corner of the city of Williamsburg, Nicholson Street was home to a vibrant and flourishing Black community. The first Black residents purchased property in the area before the Civil War. The Black community grew in the decades following emancipation, and the neighborhood became home to business owners, educators, and civic leaders. Nicholson Street was a home for Black families for more than a century, from 1849 to the 1950s. Today, this community is gone. The roots of its demise began in 1926. John D. Rockefeller, Jr., heir to the Standard Oil fortune and local elite, Reverend Dr. Goodwin, rector of Bruton Parish Church, launched an effort to restore Williamsburg to its colonial era appearance and build a historical tourism destination that will become known as Colonial Williamsburg. A plan was made to remove more than 450 buildings that did not conform to the 18th century styles. This meant displacing many of the residents and businesses on Williamsburg's main thoroughfares. As an associate of John D. Rockefeller Jr. put it at the time, there is considerable property on Duke of Gloucester Street owned by Negroes, which needs to be acquired if the idea is to clean up the street. As the Williamsburg Holding Corporation began to acquire land in the late 1920s, many Black business owners, homeowners, and residents were forced to move from prominent locations on Duke of Gloucester Street and Francis Street. Some of these families relocated to Nicholson Street. However, as Colonial Williamsburg continued to expand its footprint in the 1950s, the Nicholson Street community was also targeted for displacement. Mrs. Elizabeth Perilla described what followed in this way. All of those people's houses were just bulldozed down. Today, we share our efforts in collaboration with former residents of Nicholson Street to bring this community back to life. This research is part of the Village Initiative's Local Black Histories Project, which we launched in 2019 and later partnered with the Sociology Department at the College of William and Mary to amplify the work. In 2021, we launched the Local Black Histories website, which offers an online archive of over 80 oral histories and curated exhibits on themes such as this one. The project is governed by a community advisory board, including 17 leaders in the African-American descendant community. Today, we will begin to repopulate Nicholson Street by sharing stories of the people who live there and places they frequented, based on oral histories, census records, photography, and other archival documents. Perhaps most important to this work, this map capturing the recollections of Mrs. Lydia Frazier Gardner that was created for the 300th anniversary of the city of Williamsburg. The legacy she left with this map, which details Black homes and businesses, helped us to find many of the families we will discuss today. For those not as familiar with Williamsburg, you can see William and Mary on the far left side of this map. If you travel straight down Duke of Gloucester Street, you will find the Nicholson Street community in the northeast corner of what is CW's historic area today. After sharing this research, we are deeply honored to hear from 4 distinguished panelists, each of whom are former residents of Nicholson Street. Mrs. Christine Gardner Jordan, Mr. Dennis Gardner, Mrs. Yvonne Alston, and Mr. Anthony Conyers, Jr. We start our repopulation of Nicholson Street with Mrs. Lydia Gardner's grandfather, John Ashby, a free Black man. John Ashby purchased land in the Nicholson Street neighborhood in 1849, 15 years before the end of the Civil War. A few years later, he carried his bride, Jane Lively, over the threshold of this home. John Ashby is believed to have served on the Williamsburg City Council in the 1880s and became the first of 4 generations of family to live on Nicholson Street. Their daughter, Nanny, lived next door in the home on the left with her husband, Dennis Frazier. Nanny became an advocate for the community, addressing the Williamsburg City Council many times regarding unhealthy conditions in their neighborhood due to lack of modern water and sewage facilities. Later, Nanny's daughter, Lydia, would also live in this home, and with her husband, Clifton Gardner Sr., they would raise 5 children, including 2 who are on our panel today, Mrs. Christine Jordan and Mr. Dennis Gardner. One of the next Black residents to move to Nicholson Street was Miss Pauline Hill, who was one of the first Black public school teachers in Williamsburg, a position she held from 1875 to 1881. Her home was sold to another educator, Miss Clara Bird Baker, and her husband, Willie Baker, in the 1920s. Clara Bird Baker was not only a respected educator, but also a civil rights activist and suffragist. She was among the first women of any race to register to vote in Williamsburg, and she helped found the first integrated chapter of the League of Women Voters in Virginia. Not only was Nicholson Street community a home to city councilors and well-respected educators and civic activists, it also boasted 3 Black hotels at different points in time. This included a rooming house run by the Bakers and Porters and a Porter's Hotel, but the first hotel was the Crump Hotel, owned by Mrs. Harriet Crump. Listen to her grandson, George Preston Crump, describe the hotel.
What did they call the hotel?
This Crump's Hotel.
Crump's Hotel. And you say it was it just for Blacks? Or?
Yeah, but they didn't do that.
Uh-huh. Was it very big?
11 rooms.
Ooh.
11 rooms.
So she gave room and board.
6, yeah. They had 2 kitchens. Kitchen on one side was a kitchen, a dining room, and a living room on one side of the house. And up on that same side, the 3 bedrooms upstairs over top of it. Then on the other side was a large dining room in the kitchen, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. There was 5 downstairs, 6 up.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Breyonna. I'm a research fellow at William & Mary, so I'll be continuing this presentation. Not only was the Nicholson Street community home to a city councilor and well-respected educators and civic activists, it also boasted 3 Black hotels at different points in time. This included a rooming house run by the Bakers and Porters Hotel. Across from the hotel was Harris Hall, a theater that offered stage shows, silent movies, and even operated a dance hall. The theater was owned by Theodore Harris and featured local performers like George Preston Crump Sr., who performed stand-up comedy routines. Another long-standing hub of the community was the Odd Fellows Masonic Lodge, a meeting place for the Black community in a segregated city. The Black community used this place to organize benevolent societies that offered support for Black businesses and insurance against illness and death. The Odd Fellows Lodge also served a schoolhouse for Black children for a number of years. Another pillar of the community was the James City County Training School. This was the first school to offer high school education until the 11th grade for Black children in Williamsburg and in James City County. The school was a triumph of Black community activism, as leaders like Reverend Wales and Mr. J. Andrew Jones advocated to the school board to build this new school. There were at least 2 restaurants in the Nicholson Street area. Wallace and Cook's Hillside Cafe and Beer Garden was owned by Ernest Wallace and Milton Cook and operated as a cafe during the day and a tavern at night. John Thomas had a restaurant and confectionery. He had a contract with the city to provide food to the jail, and Dennis Gardner recalls earning a quarter for delivering the food during his school years. Reverend L.W. Wales Jr., the leader of Mount Ararat Church, moved not once, but twice to make way for the expansion of Colonial Williamsburg. Both Mount Ararat and Reverend Wales Jr.'s childhood home were originally located on Francis Street to allow the colonial restoration. Reverend Wales and his wife, Elvin Parker Wales, made a home close by on Nicholson Street, and Reverend Wales negotiated a new site for Mount Ararat Baptist Church nearby on Franklin Street. When Colonial Williamsburg again expanded in the 1950s, the Wales family was again displaced. However, Mount Ararat Baptist Church remains on Franklin Street as the only continuing standing testament to this vibrant Black community that still exists today. Nicholson Street was a mixed neighborhood of homeowners and renters. Reverend Wales helped to expand housing on Nicholson Street. He had 7 or 8 houses on a large lot that he rented to families who worked at Colonial Williamsburg or William and Mary. The Wallace family, who lived in the neighborhood, also owned a 2-story home that 3 or 4 families rented and shared. The top floor of the home was rented to Anthony Conyers Sr. and Inez Conyers and their children, including one of our panelists today, Anthony Conyers Jr. and Anthony Sr. Anthony Conyers Jr., Anthony Sr. was also a sharecropper from South Carolina who moved to Williamsburg and found work as a landscaper and janitor at Colonial Williamsburg. And Inez was employed in housekeeping by the College of William and Mary. Below the Conyers family, a section of the homes first was rented to Fred and Adeline Anderson and their children, Fred Jr. and Percy. Percy Anderson recalls Nicholson Street as a place where children would make their own fun during segregation, such as fashioning their own basketball and to make a net to play in the yard. In the late 1940s, John Tabb Sr. and Edna Tabb rented a home on Nicholson Street with their 2 children, including Yvonne Alston, one of our panelists today. Yvonne remembers her home as a hub of the neighborhood. Her mother was a beautician and operated a beauty salon in the basement of the family's home that brought a constant flow of Colonial Williamsburg employees to her home. John worked as a waiter at the Williamsburg Inn, and his coworkers came to his home to play cards and their breaks between lunch and their dinner meals. The Tabb family moved to the Carver Gardens neighborhood in the late 1950s, and Colonial Williamsburg leased the building from its owners. This is the only building left standing on Nicholson Street today that was once home to Black community members.
The close-knit community of Black homeowners and renters lived on Nicholson Street in the 1950s. However, Colonial Williamsburg was slowly surrounding the neighborhood with the historic area, a block to the south in Colonial Williamsburg employee dormitory, office buildings and laundry facilities to north. Indeed, when Colonial Williamsburg approached families in the 1950s, asking to buy their homes on Nicholson Street, families may have felt they had, little choice but to sell. They were living in the Jim Crow South in a city with one major employer, which was Colonial Williamsburg, that wanted to buy the land. In this oral history excerpt, Lydia Frazier Gardner explains her decision to sell as a foregone conclusion. If one couldn't afford to rebuild their home in the colonial style, there was no choice but to sell and relocate.
Why did you move from what is now the restored colonial area, Williamsburg?
Well, my house was not a colonial house. I would have had to build something to keep it with Colonial Williamsburg, and I wasn't able to do that. So I sold and built.
Lydia Gardner sold in 1955, 106 years after her grandfather, John Ashby, first purchased land on Nicholson Street. Nicholson Street has transformed dramatically since the 1950s when the last Black residents moved out. Today, Colonial Williamsburg maintains open pastures on the past site of these Black homes, businesses, and community centers. The story of the Nicholson Street community reveals the history of a Black community displaced by a vision of Williamsburg as a tourist destination rooted in colonial nostalgia. However, it is also part of a broader history of Williamsburg, as Anthony Conyers Jr. explains in this clip.
There are a lot of people in this town who are still very bitter about what really, because it's not just Nicholson. It's Clay Street. It's, as we were talking about South End Street, York Street. York Street was a predominantly, almost exclusively Black folk in the 40s and 50s. So that's the Williamsburg story, the triangle. The Williamsburg story is the story of Black removal.
I am now honored to introduce our panelists. First, we will have Mrs. Christine Jordan, Mr. Dennis Gardner, Ms. Yvonne Alston, and Anthony Conyers Jr. This research will soon be available online through our interactive story map, where you can explore the Nicholson Street community in much more detail than we'll have time to share. And now I'll turn it over to our panelists.
Good morning. I'm Christine Gardner Jordan, one of the descendants of Nicholson Street. When I lived on Nicholson Street, well, I was born on Nicholson Street, not in a hospital, but in 441 Nicholson, the house in the picture that you saw in the very first house, that was 441 Nicholson Street, and that's where I was born. And I stayed there for 16 years with my parents, Lydia and Clifton Gardner, and my 4 siblings. My oldest brother, who has passed, Clifton Gardner Jr., Dennis, Audrey, and my 3rd brother, Charles, who was a year older than I was. And we had fun on Nicholson Street. Like like Jackie said, you know, we made our own fun. We didn't have technology to keep us busy. So you had to use your mind and your imagination to play games. And we played in our yards, in other friends' yards, in the school that was up at the corner of Nicholson and Body Top, James City County Training School. And then we played in the streets. And it was safe then because there wasn't too many cars going by, even though it was the tourist district. And we had plenty of friends to play with. There were children of all ages, from the babies up to high school and kids. And so there was always someone to play with. However, we couldn't go out to play until we had finished our chores and taken care of everything that we needed to do. then you would get your bath, have lunch and get your bath, and then you could change clothes and go out and play. And there were the Wallaces on one side of us in the Oddfellows Hall, and there were quite a few children there. And then there was, these are later newcomers to Nicholson Street, by the way. So I even babysat them or carried them to church along with us as we walked everywhere we went. And it was just a lot of fun. And Nicholson Street was a true community. Everyone looked out for everyone else, and parents and adults were expected to correct young people if they saw them misbehaving. And you can believe by the time you got home, the word was already there. And I don't think we got telephone till much later, but somehow the word always preceded us. Then there, and there were families of all ages. And there were singles renting from the different housing or the hotel. And there were just single families living in some houses, multiple families living in some houses, and just a beautiful community of people who respected each other and took care of each other. We also, walked to church, walked to school, walked to our friends' homes, or even sometimes we were adventurous and could walk as far as South Henry Street to visit my aunt. But basically, our lives during those first 16 years were centered around Nicholson Street. Bruton Heights School that I attended wasn't too far away, and the church wasn't too far away. And then Mrs. Clara Bird Baker. She was my 4th grade teacher, and I loved her dearly. And I wanted to be just like Mrs. Baker, because even though in the classroom, she was an ideal teacher, she respected the students, she helped us in whatever our needs were. But I wanted to be like her because, well, she lived on Nicholson Street, as it was stated, up next to the training school. And after she came home in the evenings, her day wasn't over. You would see her heading out after dinner time, and she would be walking up Nicholson Street or up Duke of Gloucester Street, headed to church or to one of her civic meetings. And I just admired her dearly and wanted to be just like Mrs. Baker. And then later on, we were on Nicholson Street before the Tabbs came and the Conyers came. And so I guess we were ambassadors for the street, and all of the young children, my sister and brother, who was immediately a year older than I was, would look out for the other children on the street. And we would carry them to Sunday school or take them up the street and play at the school field. And we just had a good time on Nicholson Street. And really, when the topic of selling our home, I never heard my parents say a negative thing about it. And they only told us why they were selling. And that was to get a house that was in better physical condition, structure. We were able to buy a car, and then we were able to have help financially with my parents were able to help financially with supporting the children getting further education. At one time, there were 3 of us in college at the same time. And so we thought there was a need, and they decided that that was best. And of course, children weren't involved in making decisions in the family then. Parents had their own, adults had their conversations, and we weren't supposed to be a part of it. However, sometimes I think my older brothers and sister listened through the grate enough, but other than that, we weren't involved in making that type of decision. Now, after we moved, after we got the house, which was much smaller than the home that we had lived in, because we had the 2-story house that you saw in the picture, but we moved to a 1-story house in Carver Gardens. So it was much smaller, a rancher. It was much smaller. It was much further away from church and school. I was a sophomore then, so I had spent 10 years in Pruden Heights School, and I wanted to graduate from Pruden Heights. I loved it. And so I had to work after school and in the summers to earn tuition money to complete so that I could pay tuition to continue to attend Pruden Heights, which was in the city, because Carver Gardens was in the Bruton district of York County, so we would have had to go to school in Yorktown. But then there was the problem, even though my family got a car, I couldn't drive it. So I had to find, or my parents helped me to find a way to get to school each day. And which wasn't a real problem since I was young and could walk, but sometimes I had to walk up to the James City County line from York County to catch the bus, or I would catch a ride with someone who was going in the direction of Williamsburg, such as my 5th grade teacher. I wasn't in the 5th grade then, I was now a junior in high school, but she lived across the street from where we lived in Carver's Garden. So sometimes I could catch rides with some of the teachers or other people who were going to town around that time of morning. But then I couldn't catch a ride home from school with them because they had other things to do. So I would walk over to Duke of Gloucester Street, and I worked at the Rexall drugstore number 2, Mr. Hall. I'll never forget him. And but I walked over there, and then I would work until my father got off from work, and then he would drive, or I would catch a ride home with him. And during that time, he was working at West End Market as a delivery man. So he had use of the delivery van that they used at that time. And so I was able to get home then, but sometimes to just go by a friend's house and study until it was time to catch a ride to go home. But I think that was the only inconvenience for me as a young person. I know there were many other inconveniences for those who had more responsibilities. And my parents never said anything negative to us. I even asked my older brother, my older brother between the 5 of us was just 7 years older than I was. But anyway, he had married and had moved out at the time, and he wasn't aware. Evidently, he can't remember my parents talking to him about having to sell. So it wasn't until many years later that I found out the real reason why we were displaced. And that's just about it for me. Dennis?
Well, you covered about everything. However, I was born in 1934. Same place, 441 Nicholson Street. So I'm about 4+ years older than my sister. I can remember growing up on Nicholson Street. Few different experiences because I was a little bit older. My brother's 2.5 years older than I am, and he's not dead. My youngest brother is the one who's dead. My oldest brother is in the nursing home down in York County. But I can remember playing in the historic area when we were growing up. We had limitations, as my sister said. You could get up in the morning, do your chores. You'd put on the same clothes you had on the day before, but you couldn't go out of the yard until in the afternoon. You'd take your bath, change into fresh clothes, have your lunch, rest. They insisted you had to rest in the middle of the day. And then you could go out of the yard, but you couldn't go very far away. And you had to be in a whistle, like the referees use in sports, you had to be in hearing distance. There were 5 of us. My oldest brother wasn't really tied in with our recreational activities because he was older. But you'd go out and play, and if mom or dad wanted you, she would blow the whistle. And the kids would say, all right, you all have to go. You know, you got to go home. You can hear the whistle. We were basically, Mrs. Bridgeforth, Mrs. Williams, has an organization called The Village. And we were raised in a village, in a true village. Everybody looked after everybody in the village. We played together, we stayed together. Very few arguments at all developed in our neighborhood. We were very close. We had one white family who lived in the house, the Tabb's house, prior to them moving in. And I can remember on payday, on the weekends, the wife and the kids would come to the house and mom would watch over them because he was a drinker and sometimes be a little bit violent in his home. So those kids came up to my mom. My mom lived to be 108 months old, but that's the only white family we had living right in our neighborhood. However, on the Duke of Gloucester side, the Nicholson Street area and over on Francis Street, there were executives who worked for Colonial Williamsburg who had children, and we played together. Kids my age, anyway, we used to play football and run and play up on the courthouse green, and never had any arguments. And as I tell people, I never heard anybody call us the N-word. Never did. We knew there was segregation. We couldn't go to the theaters. We couldn't go to the bowling alley. But the segregation was not really thrown up in your face. You didn't have to cross the street when you walked up the streets. You couldn't sit down in the drugstores, but we could go up and have ice cream after church. Our parents would give us money to go to church and put in Sunday school and so forth. And after that, we would walk up to the Rexall service station up by the drugstore up by the Williamsburg Theater, buy ice cream cone, and then you had to come outside, and then we'd walk up and down to Gloucester Street and eat your ice cream. But I have 2 memories of Nicholson Street. After I grew up, went to college, came home, and went to work for Colonial Williamsburg on my second term of employment with them, I moved back to the Nicholson Street area, but I was among the first Black family to rent one of the historical homes in the Colonial Williamsburg area, which was the Carter Moyer House off of Francis Street by the gun shop and in the Capitol Green area. And I played up there, but I do remember some of the stings of segregation in the process of when I became a young man, living in that area. No one calling you names or so forth, but you felt it. You couldn't progress in employment, for instance. There was no mobility, so I had to keep shifting from one section of Colonial Williamsburg to another. I started off as a cost and records clerk in construction. Couldn't get uptown to the Goodwin building. I had to stay out in the field where I worked, no upward mobility. So I moved over to the hospitality section. And I worked as an assistant manager at the motor house. And I can remember Mr. Brook, one of my supervisors, really the manager, and I was the assistant manager in training, called me in one day and he said, Dennis, I got something to tell you, and I hope that you don't feel offended. He said, Mrs. Perdue, who came out of Gosin, she said to me, you know, it's a shame that Mr. Gardner, she didn't call me Mr. Gardner. She said, Dennis is such a nice guy. I know he's black because he's such a nice guy, you know. And he said, he asked me, he said, well, what does that have to do? What does blackness have to do with Mr. Brook was a Jewish person. She said, what does the color of his skin have to do with it? She said, well, I'm just not accustomed. She was one of the people I supervised. And I'm not accustomed of dealing with black people supervising me. And he said, well, you know, he's in training to become a manager with Colonial Williamsburg in the food and beverage industry. So you just have to deal with it. And that's one of the things I can remember that really stung and I remember. And then I can remember my mother telling us a tale about prior to Colonial Williamsburg fully developing the restoration project. My mother was a school teacher. She finished Virginia Seminary out in Lynchburg, but she had arthritis real bad. And so she had to leave teaching. And she became an interpreter at the George Wythe House. And she was working at George Wythe House and overheard that, and I can't prove this part, but I think it was Dr. Goodwin's wife who said, this is too good of a job for a black person to have. And so they let her go. And she left there, and we were still living on Nicholson Street at that time. And then she went to work as a housekeeper at the Tabb Brick House Tavern house of Colonial Williamsburg. And she met a person who knew one of the vice presidents for Colonial Williamsburg, Mr. Goodbody. And she introduced him to Mr. Goodbody. And they employed her as more or less a babysitter. And the kids had to call her Mrs. G. They remained friends, the children and the parents remained friends with our family and still are. The parents are dead now, but I think the daughter and the young son is still living.
Right, I got an Easter card from
Yeah,
yesterday.
and they come and visit us in Williamsburg often, all the time, really, they did. And when I graduated from high school, Mr. Goodbody called my mama in and told her, she said, well, I got a scholarship from the Black Teachers Organization. It wasn't, that's not what it was called. It was called a Circle Shamar for the like of social gathering, places to have social gatherings and people coming together, places to go like the like the white communities into the taverns and the restaurants and so forth, to keep the teachers here in Williamsburg. They formed a group and had most of their social gatherings in the homes. But they gave me a scholarship, and I think it was $350 to go to college. And he called her in and said, well, if he goes to school, well, now this is just 1 year though, and that don't get you through college. He said, I'll pay, the family will pay half of your tuition until he graduates. And so they were good people in a segregated southern town, really not a city here, but there was also that sting of those who said, there is a place for you and there's a limit to what you can accomplish in this town anyway, in Williamsburg. And those are the stings that I can remember. I don't ever remember about anybody overtly coming to my face and saying nasty things to me as a result of the color of my skin. That's my contribution.
Good morning. My name is Yvonne, Tabb, Alston. My family is a long-standing family here in Williamsburg. My family moved to Nicholson Street when my brother and I, who was 2 years younger than me, I guess I was at least 4 years old, 3 or 4, because I went to Miss Gerst's kindergarten, 2 years. And, but as far as living on Nicholson Street, like it's been said before, we just had a lovely childhood. It was really a community. Junior and I, that's Junior always to me, but played in the backyard because we had a swing set, so we would just fly as high as we could go. But before that, though, my mother was a beautician, so her beauty parlor was in the basement. And also, we also had married couples. We had 2 married couples that lived with us because those people who came, because it was seasonal work in Williamsburg. So many people came here, and so they rented rooms, but most of them were for single people. But my parents rented to married couples. So we had 2 married couples living with us also. And if, like you say, the house is still there, but it represents nothing like when we were there living, because we had a front porch, we had the living room, and then when you entered, there was the hallway with the stairs, and then to the right was a bedroom that they rented out. And then we had 2 bathrooms behind that, and then there was the kitchen, and then there was the dining room, and then there was another bedroom, and then the living room on the front. And then we had 2 bedrooms upstairs also, and a long back porch. And so it was a full house. And like we said before, my father was a waiter. So during that time, people didn't have places to go, just to go somewhere to be. So our house was open between the break time from lunch and dinner. Many of the waiters would come over, play cards, and solve the problems of the world. And because my mother was the beautician, and then by her customers, many of my friends would come over with them, and she would do their hair sometime too. So I had plenty of playmates. In fact, we would it was just free for us, right? The tourists would leave at 5 o'clock. That's when Capitol would close, and so it was like our playground then. So we would ride our bicycles all through the Capitol because you could hear the echo. So that was fun, and the old jail would put him up there sometimes, and just the haystack, we would just roll down the hills, and then we would go to the stables. It was just a fun time for us, and we would make mud pies and make them eat it. But I want to make a public apology to Anthony right now, because I did hit him on the head with a bottle one time, and I thought I killed him. So I want to tell you, I'm sorry. I got that off my chest, so. But oftentimes we would, in the front, we would play out, we'd have our hula hoops, and we would just be hula hooping, and we would go down and go up and all that. The tourists would walk up, they said, oh, and they would just be enthralled with us taking pictures. But also sometimes the tourists would come in our house. And I would be in there sucking my thumb, watching TV, and I look at myself, and I said, Mama, those white people in the house again. Because if they took the sign down, but it used to say 7076 River Auditor. So the tourists thought we were on the list too. But we would just, it was, well, here in Williamsburg, we would just climb trees. It was just a fun time. Yeah, we did. So we were at our parents were sheltered. They sheltered us also. They kept us from, like you said, it was discrimination, but no one really talked about it, and they just kept that from us and just let us enjoy our childhood. I was adopted by the Gardner family. So where they went, I went. My father, because his family was displaced from Camp Harry, and they moved to Grove, so they went to Mount Gilead in Grove, that family. And my mother came here from North Carolina to go to the beautician school in Richmond. And that's when Reverend Will's wife came to Richmond to recruit women to come to Williamsburg to help do hair there, because now that we had the influx of people coming in to work, we had the laundry, the waitresses, the bus people, the maids. So they had people and didn't have enough beauticians. So that's how she ended it. And I was telling Amy how she met my father, because my grandmother liked her. And so she said, I got a son. And so she went out with one of them. That didn't go. And she went out with another one. That didn't go. She had 10 boys, but and then she went out with another one. That didn't go. She said, I got another one. I got one more. And that was John. And John was in the service. So John was the one that that's how they ended up married. And so we had a very good life there on Nicholson Street. But my parents worked hard, but like you were saying about the organization, Circus Salon, giving you money, but my mother was involved with the Philodendron Club and the Bonatons, and most of them were organizations that helped. They put on social events because people didn't have really things to do. So these social events, they might have a party, Christmas party, things like that. But most of the time, if somebody was going to school, they would raise money for that. Or whatever a family would need, they did that. So, but one of the most important things about living on Nicholson Street was that you always had somebody to cover your back. You felt that way.
We could walk anywhere and people would know you and where you going, what you doing? You know, they wanted to know. So you felt very protected. And that's what our community meant to us. We walked to church together. My brother and I ended up joining First Baptist because that's where the Gardners were. Excuse me. My mother was at Mount Arad because that's where she joined with, with the Blatons. Not the Blatons, but. Get everybody's story. Okay, all right, well, I'll stop there.
I obviously, excuse me, I obviously should have gone before Yvonne because I could turn this table around significantly. Well, I spent from 1947 to 1956 at 455 and a half Nicholson Street. The half being because the guy my parents rented from built a house behind his house and rented it out primarily to the Conyers family on the second floor and the Anderson family on the first floor. And consequently, if you ask me, what are the first three family names I can remember, I would say to you Anderson, Gardner, and Tabb. And it's a blessing that first of all, that I know 75 years later, I know Anderson's, Gardners, and Tabbs. I'm sitting at a table 75 years later with Christine and Yvonne, and for my sins, I have to sit with Dennis too. But no, I cannot tell you how blessed I am to have spent that time on Nicholson Street and to have had these people for friends all the days of my life. I forewarned my colleagues at a meeting that I was going to take a little bit different spin on this thing, because I figured they were going to tell as much about growing up down there as needed to be told. My mother was a news freak, and so from the time we got our first television set, CBS Evening News with Douglas Edwards was a requirement in our household. And it didn't take long for me to get addicted to it as addicted to it as she was. So I think it's fair to say that I became aware of what was going on around us, or going on in the world fairly early in life. And that was true, even though I was growing up in a 200-year-old time capsule called Colonial Williamsburg. And just as I was getting clear about the nature of that time capsule, it was becoming clear that we were going to have to move out of that time capsule. It was becoming clear that we were growing up in the very cradle of American democracy. We were growing up in the place where Jefferson and Washington and Patrick Henry, James Madison walked the paths and the streets. And we were walking those very same streets and pathways. You know, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Among them is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I was beginning to figure out they weren't talking about me. And then I was beginning thinking, you know, but they should have been. But now I gotta move. And is there a relationship between the fact that I gotta move and that they weren't talking about me? Now that was important, but I had different things more important things on my mind, on my plate at that time. I'm 10 years old. And what was on my plate? Well, somebody had to replace Bill Russell on the Celtics. And I figured it just as well be me. Well, 5 years later, when I was not on the Celtics, but I was the center at Bruton Heights, I realized a couple of things. Number one, I had stopped growing. I was 6'5", and that was it. Been 6'5" for 2 years, not gonna get any taller. And number two, if I was gonna see the Celtics, I was gonna have to buy a ticket. Fortunately, I came to realize that a higher calling was serving people in need. Some of that came from being a news geek. Some of that came from internalizing what I saw and I heard hanging around the Capitol, hanging around the palace, and being interested in history and the like. Lost my older sister 2 years ago. And I used to tease her. She was really a trailblazer of a sort in the corrections field in terms of women. Women, and especially African-American women. She was at one point deputy warden at Lorton, and she retired as the director of training for all the Lorton facilities. And I used to tease her that she got a lot of her training out from the old jail at Colonial Williamsburg, when we used to play in the stockades and this sort of thing. But I do believe that we got something out of that experience, other than just a place, a neat place to grow up. There is something about that idea of growing up in the context of the historic area that is meaningful in some other ways. I'm thankful to the Limit Project, the Lassiter family, the Village Initiative. They forced me to think about the Nicholson Street experience more than I have in a long time. Over the last 3 years, we've been having these conversations on several occasions the last 3 years. And I've always been conflicted about the Williamsburg experience, period. For this, I see Janice out there shaking her head, so I think she understands where what's about this. Williamsburg has been great for me. You know, I've profited in a lot of ways from growing. I don't live on the second floor of a rented guy's house, so anymore, or work to school, but there are these messages that you get when you've been here as long. Thank you. I see Jackie shaking her head. That you get when you've been here a while, and you know that there's this thing in the air. Let me tell you this story because we're running out of time. Let me tell you this story, and it's going to have to suffice just given the time. My daughter and I. No, let me say this. My father worked for CW for 30 years. He was a landscaper. He was an ex-sharecropper from South Carolina. I like to say he escaped. Man, and that's not far from the truth. He escaped, no education really. My mother taught him to write a little, primarily to write his name. Got married, came to Williamsburg, 1942. He worked for Colonial Williamsburg for over 30 years. I worked there for 4 summers as an interpreter. For landscaping 1 year, was an interpreter for 3 years. My son's now been there for almost 20 years. He's the director of information technology services for the foundation. I worked for James City County for 30 years. We're Williamsburg folk. My wife is was chief deputy Commonwealth's attorney for 10 years here in Williamsburg before she moved to the bench. We're Williamsburg folk. But anyway, my daughter and I were down riding our bicycles in the historic area because I like to take the kids down, show them Nicholson Street and this sort of thing every once in a while. And I had an old pickup truck at the time. We throw bicycles on the back of the pickup truck. And we happened to pull in the parking lot right behind Old Nassau Street church. So we back then, we putting the bicycles back on the truck. And the CW cop pulls up. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock on the Sunday afternoon. Comes up and says, "Do you belong here?" See, that's the question. Do we belong here? 100 and some years in the same house. Do we belong here? And how do we come to grips with that? See, I'm crazy, So I've decided I belong here because you can't run me out of here, But normal, people with good sense, normal people, somehow we have to make normal people feel like they belong here. And that's the challenge to the Williamsburg community. That's the challenge to the cradle of American democracy.
First of all, I want to say thank you all so much. Thank you for your longevity. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your boldness, and thank you for your willingness to tell your stories. As I listen to you, each of you today, I hear stories within the stories. I hear how we all are connected to these common threads. I hear these stories and they make me emotional. I've heard each of you many times before, but each time I hear something more. And I know that what we are doing as a team, us, the village, the college, the students, the community, that it has meaning, it's powerful. I thank you all. The stories within the stories, there are so many more stories to be told. Each of you, Yvonne, your joy and your humor as you brought Nicholson Street to life. The Gardners, as you shared the sense of family, and the village dinners, the community. And you and Jackie have been my village all of my life. So that means so much. And Mr. Conyers, always, I thank you. You went to school with my uncle and you shared so many amazing stories. And today, I mean, you just brought it home. It was just so powerful. I can't wait for us to get back to work continuing to tell the stories, continuing to, as Janice Kennedy says, people and populate the community and tell the stories of the African-American community. And of those of us who have stayed the course, I heard Colonial Williamsburg and being employed many times. And we all have some stories in that respect, whether we were employed or our parents were employed or all of us were employed generation after generation. And I hear many of the same stories. But I also, for me, I retired from Colonial Williamsburg 2 years ago. A lot of people look at me and say, oh, you're retired? You know, God opened that door. And I said, if God ever opened the door, I was running through the door. I knew that my ancestors' blood ran deep in those hallways, on those floors, and in those places where I walked. I knew that I stood on shoulders of greatness. I stood on you guys' shoulders when you came through those doors and couldn't break that ceiling to go into management. But you paved the way for us. I left there as one of the only only women, the African-American women to serve as a captain in the banquet department. That was very prestigious for people who don't know much about Colonial Williamsburg. I came on the shoulders of Harold Crump, Mr. Gardner, and you all paved the way for me. And I learned many things that I can share wherever I go and whatever I do in life. So I thank you. I hear stories of the Old Waiters Club. I've heard from Cookie about the Old Waiters Club. A lot of people don't know. So those are stories that we have to continue to tell, because those waiters and servers and people that cleaned the rooms and made Colonial Williamsburg what it is, there are some stories to tell. And again, we honor you. We honor Nicholson Street. We thank you so much for giving us that glimpse of your lives and of the community. And we're just honored to tell the stories. And I thank you all, each of you, for joining us today. And I hope that you walk away with a sense of purpose, a sense of community, and a sense of unity, that this story is everyone's story. As we always say, African-American history is American history. And thank you all for bringing that to life today. And we have time for a few questions. If anyone has any questions for the panelists, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer those questions. Yes, ma'am.
Who were some of the other families who lived on Nicholson Street?
Well,
The Wales family, Reverend Wales and his family. There were the Wallaces, Turners, Parkers, Robinson, Stewart.
And I heard you mention the Andersons. Who were they? Did you mention the Andersons?
Yeah.
Yes, well, you would know Warren Anderson and Mark Anderson, Antoinette Anderson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're their parents.
Okay.
But I understand from the point of view of the research and the reality and the research, we're talking about from the end of the Civil War till 1956. And now Dennis is old. But you don't go quite that far, and we are, I don't know of anybody from Nicholson. Are you older than I? You're older than I, right?
Yes, he's older.
Yeah. You're older than I.
Oh,
No,
Me? I'm older than you.
I said
I
Yes.
So Dennis is probably the oldest. He's certainly the oldest person in town.
No, but Clifton Gardner, our oldest brother.
But he's not in town.
Yes, he lives in Williamsburg.
He's living in Williamsburg?
Well, he's in Yorktown nursing home.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, so
Right. No, I just wanted to hear who some of the other families
there
were.
are lots of families whose names we don't know. The Crumps, Crumps had a hotel.
I knew the Crowns.
Down there. The whole host of families who lived in those houses that Reverend Wales had behind his house. There, the Whitbys.
Okay.
There were houses behind on Franklin Street and
White City.
White City.
Well, I just wanted to stand and.
Say what?
just-
Well, yeah, it's closer
Well,
to,
look,
that's
okay.
closer to Lafayette Street.
Yeah, this is my question, Cookie. Okay, that's for later.
We have time for one more
That's my
question.
cousin,
Yeah.
so I can say that to her, but I just want to thank you for your presentation.
Mhm.
It was very informative for me. My father, Mary, calls him Mr. Colonial Williamsburg. That was John Henry Lee, but I know very little about, Williamsburg, and you just shared so much this morning in your presentation. I just want to say thank you for those stories.
Absolutely. Thank you for your question. Does anyone else have any question?
We have time for.
Yes, sir.
Has there been any discussion with the Colonial Williamsburg about doing something about the African-American history in this city as y'all talked about now? I mean, because tourists come here looking, especially African-American tourists, come here looking for a story other than Colonial Williamsburg. Has there been any discussion about adding this on to the packet?
There are many stories and many discussions. I can't speak for Colonial Williamsburg, but I can speak for the work that the village is doing. We are working on several things as we speak. And the community is working on the history trail. Those are some other things that other folks can speak on, but I can speak on the work that we're doing. If you go to our website, you'll see that we have housed close to 100 oral histories. And with the Local Black Histories Project, we've worked hard to tell the stories of our community. We collaborated with another group, which will be doing a panel discussion at 2 p.m., which is the folks from the reservation community, which will talk again about the dispossessioning of African Americans in this community. Later on this summer, we will be working on a project that will go further out onto Armstead Avenue and to Clay Street to tell the stories of those families. So there are many stories to be told. Colonial Williamsburg has had since the 1950s to tell our history. So I often say you can knock on the door, keep knocking, but while we're knocking on the door, we're going to be building our own tables, telling our own stories. And I don't think it gets any better than hearing it from the actual folks who lived the lives. Colonial Williamsburg came in and dispossession the families and moved the families. The families are still here to tell the story. And yes, we all worked for Colonial Williamsburg, and but this is another story. This is another part of it. I hope Colonial Williamsburg will make the choice to do some things, and I think they have. And if you follow the media and the news, again, we can't speak for them, but you do see them doing a lot of things. But please recognize that this is what really matters. Here it is right here for you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question because we have another session in 10 minutes that needs to set up in this room. One more question, please.
Can I just make a comment? And this is particularly for those who won't be staying for the next session. My name is Maureen Algersman Lee. I work here at Will and Mary as director of the Bray School Lab. So as we look at the continuum of history in Williamsburg, I just want to also add that the Bray School Lab has partnered with Colonial Williamsburg Foundation to produce a book on the Bray School. And central to that book will be reflections on members of the descendant community on various documents that tell the history, but what this means in the larger context of the history of Williamsburg. So the next panel does talk about the Bray School to a certain extent, but I know that there are other sessions that people are going to, and I didn't want to lose the opportunity to mention that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And we encourage you to visit the Village Initiatives website and see the work that we're doing to illuminate and elevate the stories of the descendant population. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jack.
Jack.
She can answer what Colonial Williamsburg is doing. Janice candidate. I think she can have Colonial Williamsburg.
Yeah.
Yeah.